Hello, so this is another lecture for our controllership class, and we will now look into managers, human behavior, and organizations. Why are we looking into the context or concept of management control and managers, human behavior, and organizations? First, we have defined in previous lectures where we have defined management control systems, which are the set of tools that we are using to implement strategies. Essentially, for us to be able to implement strategies, we need to come up with a system where we align the behavior of people within the organization so that they are able to implement strategies, so that their actions is aligned with strategies. Essentially, that's what management control is all about. Okay. In a previous lecture, we've defined what are these strategies of organizations and how is it developed. So this is what we want to achieve. That's why we implement management control systems, right? In this session or in this video, what we'll talk about is how do we then define what is that behavior? What is behavior? What is human behavior and what molds human behavior? So that we can understand what is the system that we need to implement so that we can bridge the two. Bridge human behavior and allow them and properly structure a management control system that allows them to implement strategies or make sure that their actions are within the strategies of an organization. Okay, so essentially, that's the reason why we are doing this. Okay, now in terms of human behavior, there are three basic models with respect to human behavior. Okay, the first model is what we call the economic model. No? Basically, this says that the behavior of a person is defined by economic interests, defined by a rational economic choice, right? So here, we are looking at we are talking about humans which are economic beings. They are rational, okay, and motivated by monetary incentives. Well, in economics, hindi naman talaga money per se, but utility, happiness, right? That is what's being maximized in terms of most economic models. But utility is usually parang na-equate to maximization of money from a finance standpoint. So that's the first model with respect to human behavior. We look at them as as economic beings. That's number one. The second economic model is the social models. Essentially drawing from sociology. Okay? Here, ang point of view naman ng human behavior sa social models of human behavior is that groups define the behavior of an organization. 'Di ba? Di ba parang sa economic model tinitingnan natin yung people, they make choices about their actions those choices are supposed to maximize their happiness or maximize money, which we equate for happiness for simplicity in economic modeling, right? Sa social model naman of human behavior, it simply means that for us to be able to understand how a person will decide in his actions, we have to look at the group where he belongs. Okay? Kasi yung grupong yun influences the kind of person, the kind of actions that this person will do or undertake. And the third is the psychological model. So we draw upon the discipline of psychology and understand what motivates individuals. Motivation. Okay? And obviously, the economic model sort of contributes to motivation, right? The social model also sort of contributes to motivation, but there are other aspects which contributes to the individual motivation of people. So we'll try to have an understanding, no, albeit very short understanding of those three models. Okay. So first we go with the economic model of human behavior. Um, the economic model of human behavior is something that was very evident during the financial crisis in 2007 and 2008. We don't have time to discuss what happened, but essentially because the financial sector, kasi ang compensation scheme in the financial sector was mainly variable. Okay? So yung mga tao within the financial sector, financial institutions in the US, they're very motivated about profits. Right? Kasi ang laki-laki ng variable bonuses nila. Because they have so much variable bonuses, they're motivated by profits. And so, for them to take in more profits or generate more profits, what happens is, what happened, was they were also very lax in terms of risk taking, right? They they securitized or they issued securities, right, that have a high risk, and sold them like hot potatoes so that they can take profits out of it. Then eventually, those financial instruments, they imploded kasi yung asset backed sila eh. At yung asset na nagbaback doon sa mga securities na yon suddenly became worthless. No? And hindi nakuha ng usual due diligence. Hindi nakuha ng usual analysis kasi they were so motivated with variable pay. Okay? So here, it shows the classic motivation, economic motivation of people, which is syempre to earn money. Okay? They maximize their payoff from their work with little regard to damage done to others. So they were incentivized with a lot of risk taking because that enabled them to maximize their payoff from their work. No? And that's one example of the application of the economic model of human behavior. Kasi sobrang ganda nung motivation for profit taking or profit generation that they were willing to disregard the impact on others, meaning wala masyadong due diligence when it comes to issuing these securities. Okay? So essentially, that's what happened then, and a good example of the economic model of human behavior. Of course, when we talk about the economic model of human behavior, the objective of people is to maximize utility in their decisions. When we talk about utility in economics parlance, this is usually equated to happiness. But for us to make it more tangible, happiness is in the form of money when we talk about finance, right? Money or consumption. Consumption more broadly, money more directly. Okay, so people make rational and deliberate choices based on this maximization of their own utilities. Their main motivator for time and efforts is to receive monetary payments. Okay, so if you're able to link goals and objectives of the organization and link it with monetary payments, then that is one way to motivate or one way to mold human behavior so that they can be in line, their actions will be in line with strategy. Of course, assuming that they are rational human beings. Okay, yun naman ang assumption ng economic model, no? That people are rational and make deliberate choices based on maximization of consumption. And if you give them opportunities to maximize consumption by achieving certain goals and objectives, then you're able to align their actions to whatever is the action that will lead to the implementation of goals and objectives of an organization. Essentially, that's the economic model of human behavior, and that's why compensation mechanisms, monetary payments, compensation schemes are an important element of management control. Okay, how compensation links to scorecards, how compensation links to the performance appraisal of a person, of a department, of a company, no, is critical because it satisfies the economic model of human behavior. Okay. Another concept that we have discussed is the agency theory. Okay. Agency theory is actually part of a branch of economics called information economics. This is about differences in information between two people. Okay. And agency theory is part of information economics. Okay. So ano nga ba yung discussion natin before about agency theory? Agency theory basically says that usually there are two people or two parties, the principal and the agent. Okay? And usually, the principal and the agent has a contract between them. Okay? Ang agency theory simply says na pwedeng may conflict between the principal and the agent. Kasi pwedeng yung actions that are beneficial to the principal is not necessarily actions that are beneficial to the agent. Kaya may tinatawag na principal-agent conflict. Okay? Because there's a breakdown in terms of, kasi syempre, under an ideal world, what happens is that the principal, kaya nga niya kinontract si agent should be able to do something in my behalf. Right? But there could be incentive schemes or mechanisms that makes the two not aligned. What is the classic example? The classic example is profits versus value. Okay? Ang isang classic principal-agent problem or principal-agent relationship is shareholders, the relationship between shareholders and management. Okay? Usually, shareholders, they are very much concerned about stock prices. Okay? Management, on the other hand, is usually more concerned about profits. Bakit mas concerned ng management ang profits? Kasi yung management, hindi sila yung may-ari ng kumpanya. And therefore, kailangan lang nilang mapakita sa shareholders na minamanage nila ng tama yung kumpanya so that they will keep their job. And how do you demonstrate na namamanage yung nang maayos yung kumpanya? Kung may profit yung kumpanya, obviously. Right? So that's why management is really working hard to make sure that the company is profitable. Okay? But for shareholders, profits are good, but we need cash. By we need cash, meaning it has to reflect in stock prices so that I can feel the increase in profits of the company if I'm the shareholder. Okay, so here there's a fundamental disconnect already in terms of objectives, right? Profits does not necessarily lead to stock price increases, right? Bakit? Pwedeng may mga actions na unprofitable at the start pero creates value for the organization, right? However, management may be discouraged to do it. Why? Because tatamaan ng profits, baka masisanti ako if I'm management. So for example, you have new investments. So for example, new investments, pwedeng bumili ng isang kumpanya, yung korporasyon. Pero yung net income profile ganito, net losses muna, then biglang ang laking profit in the future. Okay? So ito, it will take say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of net losses. Okay? Pero biglang ang laki ng value na makukuha ng kumpanya in the future. Okay? If you get the NPV of this project, pasang-pasa. For example, 200 billion ang NPV. Pero ang net profit for the first 5 years, negative 300 million, negative 200 million. And that's for 5 years. Okay? If you're management, you might be discouraged to approve this kind of project or even propose this kind of project. The risk is so huge because you have net losses for the first 5 years. However, you know NPV is positive, so it should improve stock prices. Right? So, you see that there's already a disconnect between the objectives of management and the objectives of shareholders. Okay? And that is the reason behind principal-agent conflict. Okay? So, why do you want to avoid, or how do you avoid such dysfunctional behavior? No? So, you must make the agent work in the best interest of themselves and the principal. How do you then do that? A management is looking at profits. Shareholders are not looking at profits. They're looking at stock prices, right? How do you then make their interests aligned? Okay, so you design a system so that management will also take a good look about stock prices. Okay, how do you do that? How do you do that? Let me erase some portions of the screen. How can you do that? Okay, so first, you can look at compensation schemes. Pwede kang magbigay ng bonus. For example, if stock prices increase by X%, you get a bonus of X million. That's one way of aligning incentives. So that management, hindi lang profit yung babantayan niya, pero alam niya na may incentivize siya na mag-increase ng gawin ang kaya niya to increase stock prices kasi magkakaroon siya ng bonus. Second, what's another mechanism so that you can align dysfunctional behavior, or you avoid dysfunctional behavior by aligning the agent so that it works with the principal? Okay, stock compensation. Okay, so whether it's in the form of stock rights or stock options or stock appreciation rights. So, fourth year na kayo, so alam niyo na yung accounting niyan, right? Pero bakit may mga stock compensation, stock rights? Okay? Kasi if your management are also shareholders of the company, then they will also be concerned about stock prices. Okay? If you give them stock as part of the stock or shares as part of compensation, edi shareholders na rin sila. And if they are shareholders, they will also care about stock prices. That aligns incentives, right? Hindi na lang sila profits tumitingin. And there are other ways to align the best interest of the agent and the principal. Okay? So that's essentially agency theory, no? And how monetary incentives like bonuses and stock compensation align incentives and therefore molds the behavior of your managers. Okay. So usually, if there is no external uncertainty, meaning hindi masyadong disruptive yung business, a simple pay for performance contract may work well. However, if uncertainty is high, right, the optimal contract may include a higher proportion of fixed pay. Okay. We'll discuss more of this when we go to compensation, that portion of our lesson. But essentially, this sort of tries to align the best interest of the agent and the principal. Okay. Now, of course, those monetary rewards should be aligned with performance metrics. So there's a performance metric that you have to define so that it will be linked to the monetary rewards. Parang yung sinabi ko kanina, na if stock prices appreciate by say 10% in a year, then there's bonus of X million pesos. No? So there's a performance metric that we have to define. And this kind of control is called an output control. Kasi output na yung tinitingnan natin eh. There's a target that you have to reach at the end of the year. So you have to check the output and whether that output is within what is in the performance metric. Okay. What's the problem with monetary rewards? Okay, number one, of course, it's short-sighted and there's little consideration to input and throughput controls. Okay? Bonuses are, monetary rewards are short-sighted because once nabigay mo na yung pera, tapos na yung motivation. Kailangan every year mo siyang ginagawa, right? And therefore, it may come to a point that monetary rewards becomes too expensive to implement, right? That's why it's short-sighted. Also, monetary rewards, as I mentioned, are it's a form of output control. Remember, under management control systems natin, no, there are also what's called input and throughput controls. Okay, input refer to human resources, okay, and throughput refers to processes. Okay, if you focus too much on monetary rewards, you might be paying too much when some of the behavior can be aligned through input and throughput controls. Okay. Another is monetary incentives are just one of the many ways in which human motivation is activated. Okay. If you go beyond classical economics, okay, you will realize that money is not the only way where motivation is activated. No? And so if you focus too much on this kind of management control tool, then baka naman hindi talaga nakaka-maximize ng motivation din yung pera. Okay? So, of course, money cannot buy everything and therefore it's not the only way in which humans can strive for utility. Okay, that's why we need to understand other aspects of human behavior, right? Because other aspects of human behavior allows us to understand our managers better. Okay? So, bonuses and behavioral economics. So, bonuses, as you know, is a control mechanism, but its effectivity is not yet settled. Some say that it's not effective, some say it's effective. Okay? Obviously, if you're looking at it from the lens where humans are rational people, then bonuses, especially bonuses that are linked to specific performance targets, should be effective. Okay? But ang isang basic assumption for bonuses to be effective is that decisions of these people, of managers, are based on rational expectations. There's a rationality assumption. Okay? And that's the assumption in classical economics, right? However, there's an emerging field today called behavioral economics, which says that actually most people, or in under certain circumstances, okay, humans or people or economic agents do not decide based on rational expectations. They make irrational decisions systematically. Okay? So ito yung tinatawag na behavioral economics. Parang nire-relax na yung assumption of rationality. How will people decide or economic agents decide if they are not rational? Okay, so essentially that's what behavioral economics is. And this is increasingly present in our society, right? And so therefore we need to understand behavioral impact to decision making. Okay? So people may change their behavior based on the way a choice is presented, for example. So for example, people react strongly to the way a bonus system is designed. People like to win, but they do not like to lose. So for example, merong dalawang bonus systems, bonus 1, bonus 2. Okay? Under bonus 1, bibigyan ka ng additional 100,000 pay if you achieve your targets. Okay. Bonus 2. Okay. You are entitled to 100,000, but you will lose it if you do not achieve target. Essentially, pareho lang naman ng ibig sabihin yan, di ba? Pag na-achieve mo yung target mo, may 100,000 ka. But the first bonus is couched in terms that if you win, if you achieve something, you get 100,000. Yung second statement of the bonus, which essentially means the same naman talaga as the first. The second is, meron kang 100,000, pero pag hindi mo nakuha yung target mo, zero. I'll not give you the 100,000. If you look at this from a point of view of an economic decision, the payoffs are the same. Right? The payoffs are the same. If you achieve target, you get 100. If you do not achieve target, you get 0. Right? But the way people are motivated when you couch bonuses in terms of statement 1 rather than statement 2 might be different. Okay? And so that's where behavioral economics comes in. How information is presented sometimes impact motivation. Right? So let's look at some basic or some behavioral economics concepts. First is loss aversion. No? So loss aversion is the idea that people are more averse to losses than they are eager to make gains. So essentially, that's what I did in the previous example. So an example here, very simple example, is losing $100 bill, $100 bill might be more painful to you than finding a $100 bill would be positive. Okay? We are usually more averse to losses than gains. Supposed to be yung minus 100 tsaka plus 100. If you're starting from zero, under rational economics, under classical economics, same utility ito eh. Right? Iba lang ng design, iba lang ng sign. So kumbaga kung natuwa from zero, nakakuha ka ng 100, nagkaroon ka ng utility na 10, okay? 10 ang value ng utility mo. Pag you lose 100, dapat negative 10 lang yung value nun. Right? Kasi rational ka eh. Same lang dapat yung impact nun sa happiness mo. Pero, in reality, based on the behavior of people, if you lose 100, ang minus sa utility mo, minus 20. But if you find 100, plus 10 lang. So, yun yung sinatawag ng loss aversion. Okay? Next is the sunk cost fallacy. It's the idea that people will continue to invest in a losing project simply because they are already invested in it, even it means risking more losses. Ito yung problem in the stock market, for example. Okay? So, for example, for a long time, I invested in Jerry. So, global estate. No? Matagal na yon, say 15 years ago, okay, or 10 years ago. Kasi na-hype siya. Na-hype siya by people. So, I invested and then invested, no? And then biglang biglang systematically bumaba yung price ng Jerry, ng stock. No? Supposed to be, if you're a rational person and you know na hindi na siya tataas, you'll cut loss at some point. Pero may mga kilala ako, although ito, nag-cut loss na ako, pero may mga kilala ako, up to now, they still have Jerry after 15 years. No? Because they simply sayang eh, na-investan ko na. Tataas din yan. Parang ganon. Ganon yung thinking behind it. Okay? Another behavioral economics concept is called the bounded rationality concept. So it refers to the fact that people have limited cognitive ability to process information and time. Limited cognitive ability, information, and time, and do not always make the correct choice from an economist's point of view. Ibig sabihin, yung pag-process ng information. Okay? Not all people can decide rationally from information kaagad. And therefore, their rationality is bounded by their understanding. Okay? So, So that's the point. So for example, even if there's information, but because they do not want to process it, what is rational to them might not be rational from a person who is all-knowing. But the reality is people are not all-knowing. No? So yung mga does not synthesize new information quickly or ignore information in their decision making and instead chooses their gut, no? Sa point of view nila, rational sila. Pero because they don't know the information. So that's the concept of bounded rationality. So we're trying to explain it in terms of economic models, right? Kasi if all information is given, baka iba yung decision making. Or all information is processed. Or all information is understood. No? So kaya bounded yung rationality. So this why am I discussing these concepts? I'm discussing these concepts just to emphasize that for you to motivate people in organizations and make them implement plans according to what you want them to do, you cannot simply look at the monetary aspect of things. Okay? Behavior also impacts how they act. And in fact, economics is already acknowledging that fact. Na behavior, um, the psychological aspect also impacts their rational decision making. Okay? And that's why we will move to other models of human behavior. Okay? The second model is what's called the sociological model of human behavior. So, under the sociological model, we should understand that people are members of groups, okay, with certain rules and patterns, and where behavior exists within the group. Okay, so for us to be able to understand what motivates a person, you have to look at the group where they belong. So therefore, ano ba yung group where managers belong? Okay? So it's important for us to understand the group where they belong because the culture of a person impacts his decision making. Okay? Someone, for example, who is raised in the US, for example, and raised in the Philippines, might have different um, ways, no, of approaching a problem. Okay? Simply because their culture where they attacked it differently. Okay? Also, this emphasizes the importance of human behavior. It also emphasizes the importance of organizational culture. If you want people, okay, if you want people to act in the same way or in the same manner, it's important that we create a culture within the organization. Okay? So for example, if you want people to be more customer-centric, then there should be a culture of customer centricity in your organization. So that whatever the function of that person is, accounting, sales, marketing, they all have that motivation of customer centricity. Kung gusto mo may malasakit sa kapwa ang iyong mga empleyado, right? The culture, organizational culture of malasakit should be there. No? Because you are now forming or you are now forming an environment for them to create a group, no? And that group has a certain set of culture, okay? And you're also incentivizing behaviors. And in a group, if they're all in the same group and the group is inclusive, no, you have imitative behavior also. The behavior of one person imitates the behavior of the group. So that's why culture is important, organization culture. Okay? And also informal power. Informal power is power with respect to relationships between people. Even if, for example, ang boss ay si ganito, pero the informal power in organization might rest on someone else. And that is defined by the organizational culture. For example, in Manila Water, where I used to work, okay, merong mga empleyado na galing sa public sector. Ang kwento ng Manila Water was that it's a company na it's a government entity na pinrivatize. So nung pinrivatize yung public entity na yun, okay, merong mga legacy employees from the government. Okay? And those legacy employees might not be the most efficient kasi sanay sila sa government work. But they have immense institutional memory. Alam nila yung kwento sa mga nangyari sa pipes noong 1980, 1970s. Okay? And so they are very important to the organization because they have institutional memory. And so you know that there is some sort of informal power residing in those legacy employees. And so in your culture, you should be able to define their role as legacy employees. No? So kailangan natin silang alagaan, for example, because they have institutional memory. We should also encourage mentorship kasi pag nag-retire na yung mga yan, wala nang may alam, right? So those are things that are all part in the model where we see na the behavior of one person is dependent on the makeup of the group. So essentially, that's the sociological model of human behavior. And this emphasizes the importance of organization culture. Okay? So sa sociological model, yun yung parang key takeaway. Sa economic model, anong key takeaway? Monetary incentives. So monetary incentives motivate employees to do better. Sociological model, organizational culture is important. Okay? And yung monetary incentives, this is in an output control. Ang maganda sa sociological model, it promotes what's called the input control. Kasi human resources yung aspetong importante for this one. Okay? The last model is called the psychological model of human behavior, which is what you learned probably in your human behavior in organizations classes. Okay, under the psychological model of human behavior, we have to understand that behavior is driven by two drivers, beliefs and desires. Okay, so beliefs constitute our knowledge about the world, and desire constitute the way we want the world to be. So desires is something that is very powerful, in terms of motivation or human behavior in organizations. Most people or in organizations, of course, are driven by their desire to advance in the organization. No? And that desire to advance, is a way for them to be motivated. And therefore, if we can align that desire with the organizational objectives, then they may be more motivated to work through that system so that they can achieve their desired outcome, which is say promotion or acquiring new skills. That's what organizations want to achieve, or people within organizations want to achieve. Okay, so when we talk about motivation, kasi motivation is what will bring them from point A to B. Okay, so for example, currently there's a person A, meron siyang desire to be B. Ano ba yung desire na yan? Promotion, for example. Acquisition of new skills. No? So for example, ang desire din nila is, for example, to lead. Yan yung kanilang desired future. No? If that is their desired future, motivation is what drives them from A to B. So that is motivation. And for motivation to exist, it has to be defined by something. Defined as the direction of the effort, the amount of the effort, and the persistence of the effort that people exert towards certain personal or professional objectives. Okay? So part of a design for a management control system is for us to also understand what are the desires of your people within the organization. Are they promotion driven? Okay. And sometimes, the kind of generation also matters in these things. Kasi baka yung Gen Z, iba yung kanilang desired future than millennials. Okay? Sabi nila yung Gen Z, mas na raw ngayon, part of their desired future is for them to make a difference. So hindi lang yan promotion, di ba? If they want to make a difference in society. So you have to link their performance to social objectives, for example. So ibang klaseng design na yon ng management control system. But the fundamental, the foundation is for us to understand what motivates them, what is their desire. Okay? So essentially, that's why the psychological model of human behavior is very important. Okay? And that's why a critical component of management control system is goal setting. Okay? Kasi yung point A to point B, yung point B, goals yan eh. Ano ba ang goals ng personal goals, not organizational? Okay? Yung nilista ko dito, personal goals yun. Promotion, acquisition of new skills, okay? Helping society. Those are all personal objectives. Okay? So what they need to do from A to B, okay, it should motivate them to achieve the desires that they have, okay, when it comes to their professional life. Okay? Professional or personal. Okay? So goal setting theory. So that's why goal setting is very important in management control. Okay? Kasi the goals should be kasi 'di ba ulit sulat natin yung A to B. A to B. Yung B, ito yung end desire nila. Okay? Okay? Pero dapat yung desire na yan itag natin sa organization goals at itag sa personal goals. Okay? So, A, pag na-achieve mo yung goals mo na related sa organization, it will get you to a point, no, that your personal goals are closer. So, for example, si A, ang kanyang objective is promotion para maging B. Okay? Ang gagawin mo, dapat meron siyang set goals that are aligned to the organizational goals. At pag ginawa niya yung organizational goals na yan, it links to his or her or their probability that they will be promoted. Ito yung gusto nilang maging, pag ginawa ko itong goals na ito, it allows me to achieve or to be closer to my desire, which is promotion. No? And so dapat, the goals are something that's important to be set in an organization. Ngayon, yung goals na yan can be a motivation, but it can also be demotivating, right? So that's why goals should be clear and challenging at the same time. But not necessarily hard, but syempre, hindi dapat impossible. Kasi pag impossible yung goal, then it doesn't motivate, right? Kasi hindi na niya gagawin kasi hindi unreachable naman eh. Okay? So, goals should be sufficient personal and organization resources should be available so that pwede siyang ma-reach. Okay? So, what are the limitations of goal setting? Multiple, uncertain, changing goals. Obviously, yung goals, hindi naman yan fixed. Sometimes it needs to be changed. Goals that are too difficult to achieve may cause goal setting to fail. That's what I mentioned. And it may not be powerful enough if not coupled with reward. So that's why even if we know that this is desires, if you add monetary incentives to the mix, if you add org culture to the mix, then the whole system might work, right? Because you're motivating people in multiple fronts. Okay? So what are the automatic drivers of motivation? So first, this is something you learned already, which is the Maslow hierarchy of needs, obviously. Lower needs to be achieved first before a person achieves the ultimate need according to Maslow. Okay? Humans have strong urge to direct and control their own lives. You have to make sure that they are making choices. Parang they have certain levels of decision authorities. They have certain levels of freedom within the actions that they're doing. If they're too constrained, then they might be not be motivated uh, to even do it. Okay, so and that underscores what's called the self-determination theory. Okay, what motivates people if they can determine their own destiny or they can determine their own performance in an organization. So it connects to the concept of controllability. Okay, so for example, they have a goal, but they cannot control the factors that will allow them to get that goal. They will get demotivated. Okay, if they can self-determine it, meaning if I do everything in my power, I can definitely achieve my goal. No, then it enhances motivation in an organization. Okay, that's why controllability is a very important aspect of management control. Okay, kasi kung kontrolado ng isang manager yung factors which will affect the delivery of a goal or a performance scorecard in an organization, then it motivates him to achieve that goals better. Why? Because of the self-determination theory. Kaya alam niya na within his power lahat yan. So motivated siya na gawin yun. Kasi kung may mga aspects na beyond his power, uncontrollable, then parang madi-demotivate siya. Walang sense na gawin ko yung goal kasi hindi ko naman makokontrol yung result. Right? So that's why this is an important topic because it relates to the concept of controllability in management control. Okay? And we'll discuss more about controllability when we talk about responsibility centers. Okay? So this also, the self-determination theory also drives certain management control system designs. For example, bottom-up control processes or bottom-up budgeting and enabling control systems. So we'll discuss more of this later. No, pero basically it means that the proposal comes from people and it goes up the organization. Hindi siya dictated from above. Okay? So another concept that is critical is the human cognition or contemporary psychology theory. Basically, this says that people may not have a full understanding of the context in which they work, and everybody does not see the world in the same way, and that's why communication is necessary in management control. Okay, that's another pillar of management control. Because not all people within the organization will have the same viewpoints. And that's why communication plans are necessary in management control systems. Okay. So given all of this, what are the basic principles with respect to management control? Okay, first, management control systems should motivate managers and employees. And how do you motivate them? You motivate them by setting goals. Setting goals that they are asked to achieve. Okay. Now, how do we design those goals? That's exactly what management control system is all about. Anong klaseng goal? Anong goal ang pang department head? Anong goal ang pang accountant? Anong goal ang pang CEO? You have to design that. So the design of goals within an organization so that it all points towards the ultimate corporate objective is the design of a management control system. Okay. Another is that managers and employees should be motivated by the rewards. Rewards essentially means monetary compensation. Okay. But rewards can be in the form of monetary compensation. It can also be in the form of fulfilling their desires or professional objectives. So it's all part of the whole management control system. Okay. So next principle, management control system should consider managerial and employee abilities and inabilities. Okay? So ito, Ito yung management control related to input controls. Okay? Management control system should consider what they can do and what they cannot do. Okay? So they have to learn those skills. So therefore, skills development is part of management control, right? Managers and employees, tacit knowledge should be cherished. No? So this is the informal power na sinabi ko kanina. And managers and employees should be helped to overcome their cognitive limitations. So here we are looking at learning and development as a tool for management control systems. Okay? And the last principle is that management control system should support a healthy social and ethical environment. In other words, here is the importance of organizational culture. Okay? Kasi ito na yung sociological aspect of human behavior. Okay? Culture matters, social values matters, ethics matters, and how these are all cascaded within the organization and how you encourage that behavior within the organization also impact how they act within the organization. Okay? So let's look at the corporate values of a company like Meralco. So this is just an example. No, I'm not a Meralco employee, so I don't know the intricate details. No? So let's look at the corporate values of Meralco. So if you look at their website, no, they list their corporate values. So ano ang values daw ng isang Meralco employee? Number 1 is excellence. Number 2 is customer centricity. Number 3, sustainability, integrity, innovation, malasakit, and bayanihan. Okay? Why do you think these are the corporate values for Meralco? How is this related to their business? Okay? First, of course, obviously, is customer centricity. At the end of the day, Meralco is a service company, right? So, by putting customer centricity as part of their corporate values, it incentivizes people to be more customer centric, meaning you should deliver outstanding customer experiences to your concessionaires within the area of Meralco. Okay? By focusing on customer centricity, this is a value that you now na i-ingrain within the organization, right? And since it's being ingrained, everyone is expected to be customer centric. No? And it might be part of the overall strategy of Meralco. No? So for example, their strategy might be to make sure that their customers have a high satisfaction rating. No? So customer centricity adds on to that, or galvanizes or puts the foundation. No? Nasa corporate values pa lang, lahat sila dapat customer centric na. Okay? Another is bayanihan. Okay? Obviously, their service it's a public service. Electricity is needed by everyone, right? So since electricity is needed by anyone, dapat bayanihan tayo. Mahal namin ang aming kapwa at kababayan. Sa lahat ng oras, handa kaming tumugon, tumulong at maglingkod. Going beyond the time. Okay? Sa lahat ng oras, handang tumugon. So if there's a calamity, it also encourages volunteerism in your company, right? And volunteerism is important for a utility company like Meralco. No, kasi dapat naka-ingrain sa mga tao na pag calamity, kahit na bumabagyo, kailangan ko pumasok. Because it's part of the corporate values of Meralco. All the people around me are like that. No, so I'm also incentivized to do that. No, because of the sociological structures that that Meralco has set up in their organization. So that's the importance of corporate values and control. Corporate values are not merely an HR thing na parang maganda pakinggan. Corporate values also define the parang expected actions by your people within the organization. And by defining this, you create a social structure na lahat tayo sa Meralco, excellent. Lahat tayo bayanihan. Lahat tayo may malasakit. And so we are all expected to be malasakit. And therefore, the imitative value of motivation, the imitative motivation is there. Okay? Next, let's discuss some performance enhancing mechanisms according to Meralco based on their annual report. This came from the 2020 annual report. So according to their 2020 annual report, these are the performance enhancing mechanism that they have for employees. Let's look at it. So first is employee development programs. In other words, training, right? Essentially, that's what it is. So these are all trainings. And skills development yan. So this ensures that yung kanilang mga empleyado have the skills necessary for them to be able to achieve their objectives. Okay. If you look at their learning development framework, initiatives are delivered using a strategic framework of 70-20-10, 70% on the job, 20% from coaching, and 10% from formal training. Okay. So that's their program for their employees in terms of employee development or skills training. So how is this related to management control? No, because it ensures that their employees are knowledgeable on the tasks at hand. Second, compensation philosophy. So the company's performance management process measures employee performance on the basis of actual versus desired results and how results were delivered in light of corporate core values. Okay? So obviously, there's targeting kasi may actual and desired results. So each employee has a goal. No? And that's the desired results. And minimeasure siya against the actual. Okay? But an important aspect of their compensation policy is how results were delivered in light of corporate core values. So corporate core values now, in this case, are linked to compensation. Right? Kasi it's linked in their performance management process. Okay? So dapat nagawa mo yan with integrity. No? With customer centricity, with malasakit, with bayanihan. So it controls or it motivates them to do work aligned with certain principles of the company. So the achievement of financial and non-financial indicators is reflected in a performance planning and assessment process. Okay. The company implements short-term and long-term incentive programs. The company compensates employees based on company, team, and individual performance. So, ibig sabihin sa kanilang rating system or sa kanilang performance management system, may percentage siguro yung company performance, team performance, and individual performance. Pag ginawa mong ganyan yung performance management system mo, ibig sabihin, kung ikaw yung isang person, hindi pwedeng magaling ka lang. Kailangan magaling rin yung team mo. So it motivates you to help your team to achieve the team objectives. Kung ikaw naman yung team leader, hindi dapat na masaya ka lang na nag-perform yung team mo. Kailangan nag-perform yung buong kumpanya. Kasi pag nag-perform yung company, team, and individual, it is linked to performance. It is linked to compensation. Okay? So it also provides short-term incentives such as variable pay, through annual performance-based bonuses, incentive plans, etc. Okay? So these are all related to compen. Long-term incentives include additional compensation on Meralco's achievement of certain level of consolidated core income and approved by the board on an aggregate basis for a 3-year period as well as access of performance rating. So in other words, meron ding performance-based related to the net income of the company. Okay? So another performance-enhancing mechanism is succession planning. Okay? So, ano yung succession planning? Edi yung pagpaplano ng promotions within an organization. Right? Why is this an important performance-enhancing mechanism probably for Meralco? So that the leaders within the organization becomes more aspirational. May succession planning, kailangan part ako ng succession plans. Okay? And by doing the succession planning exercises, then it motivates managers, right, to do well, right? And to achieve their objectives. So ito yung desire na component ng management control. Okay? Of course, there's anti-corruption programs and code of business conducts, which also sort of links into itong number 2, how results are delivered in light of expectations. And since they are all linked to compensation, then there's monetary incentives for it. Okay? I'm sure mas may detalye pa yung performance enhancing mechanism ng Meralco, but these are all just the portion that was included in their annual reports. No? So human behavior in organizations are important, okay, because they define a significant aspect of our management control systems. Okay? That's it. Thank you.